to another wonderful episode of this great here podcast. What podcast is this here? Mariana Tripletta.
This is our podcast, No Country for Joe and Mariana.
It is. Welcome to another episode of No Country for Joe and Mariana. We got a very special treat for you today. We're doing a simulcast sort of thing. We're doing live right now on Twitch, and we've haven't really done too many live sort of things. I mean, here and there over on Facebook, but today is kind of special because we actually have a topic that we're talking about that we're very passionate about. Mariana, what is this topic that we're talking about today?
Well, in honor of the 15th anniversary of the release of The Devil's Rejects, today, July 22nd, we will be discussing the trilogy that is Rob Zombie's movies. I mean, he's done a lot of movies, but we're going to be discussing mainly Three from Hell, because we watched that recently, and then also a little bit of Devil's Rejects, and of course, the movie that started it all, House of a Thousand Corpses.
Absolutely, and I'm very happy that we're talking about this because I rarely get the chance to actually talk about these films. Rob Zombie is very, very polarizing within the horror community, depending on which film. So some people really love House of a Thousand Corpses. Some people really love The Devil's Rejects, whereas some really like the Halloween films that he did, and some really hate those. Now, I'm one of those people that just generally kind of loves Rob Zombie films in general. I think he's a great artist. He's a great musician. He's a great filmmaker. And I think there is a lot to talk about, but that does not mean that I will shine his helmet all over the place here. No, I will talk about things in a general constructive kind of a criticism of sorts, but a positive criticism, and I think people can enjoy that. Mariana, could you please start us out? What was your first experience with Rob Zombie?
My first experience with Rob Zombie was actually like when I was a teenager, and I don't remember that I watched the movies first. I do remember that I just heard, not on the radio, but on my friend's car stereo, this song come on, and it was Pussy Liquor. Which is a theme in House of a Thousand Corpses, and I thought it was just like the most wonderful thing. It starts out like the track itself starts out with Baby screaming at these cheerleaders, and when I saw the movie, it all made sense, of course, but the story within just that one song drew me into Rob Zombie.
Yeah, and I think my first experience is the music as well. Of course, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and so I heard a lot of his music in the 90s and the early 2000s, just like Dragula and things of that nature. And I always really enjoyed his music every time it'd come on. I'd thump my foot and things of that nature. But of course, I'm a little fuddy-duddy when it comes to music. But it wasn't until House of a Thousand Corpses came out that I really got excited. And I remember back in the day, there was this kind of long period where the movie was announced, and then it took a couple years before it actually ended up hitting theaters because of everything that ended up happening. And just to give you a brief summary of what happened was it was made not by Lionsgate. Universal, I think, originally made the film. And I'll probably get this all wrong, but a studio made the film, and then they saw it, and they're like, we can't release this because it is so bloody and gory and crazy and all that stuff. But the trailer, I remember the trailer. Anyway, not the trailer. Okay, not yet. So I remember that I saw the trailer, and it took a couple years before it ended up coming out, and I kept wondering, where the hell is this movie? Where the hell is this movie? And then, of course, the story later came that Lionsgate ended up picking up the property and then releasing it. So anyway, that's the story in a nutshell. But I remember when I first saw the trailer, it was like a little sneak peek, and then I literally had these visions of like a house filled with thousands of corpses, and I thought it was going to be the craziest, bloodiest, goriest film. And then I saw the film, and I was lukewarm on it. And because I don't think I was like old enough to appreciate some of the themes. I think Rob Zombie himself has kind of admitted that it was that it was an imperfect film, and hence the reason he went and did Devil's Rejects after that to kind of complete his vision and kind of deliver on the things that he had in his mind about what he wanted to present out there. Mariana, what did you think about House of a Thousand Corpses when it first came out?
When it first came out, well, I didn't see it when it first came out, but
First time you saw it,
and it wasn't, yeah. So the first time I saw it, I think I also, just in general with the Rob Zombie movies, including Devil's Rejects, I think at the time didn't really have the appreciation for those kinds of movies yet. A lot of people that know me know that I am a huge like Pixar nerd, and so I was mostly focused on like animation and things like that. But now that now that I'm older and stuff, the thousand House of a Thousand Corpses, I had the same exact thought, right? Like I'm expecting 1,000 corpses in this house, just like kind of like just on top of each other, or I don't know. It was not what I expected it to be, but I wasn't dissatisfied with what I saw. I really liked the character of Baby. I really liked the character of Otis. And I what it was for what it was, I really enjoyed it. But again, I didn't expect I expected there to be more corpses, which is actually kind of funny because there's that scene where Baby brings in that one nerdy dude, and it just has like that. The most corpses you see is all those dolls right outside of the house that are just like pinned against the walls, and I thought that was really cool.
I almost feel like the Devil's Rejects, which ended up coming out a few years later. I don't know exactly. It was quite a few years later when that one came out. Actually, kind of delivered more on the House of a Thousand Corpses thing in my mind, just right off the bat when you're being introduced to reintroduced again to the characters of Otis and Baby, and I think it was Mama.
She goes by many aliases.
Yeah, like the Firefly, and I think the family goes by many different names as well. And then Captain Spaulding shows up, but I remember right at the beginning, Otis is sitting there and he's got like dead chick gals around him, and then Baby's like dead people around here, and I'm like, no, this is more. And I think Devil's Rejects is most definitely, in my mind, a modern masterpiece. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about Devil's Rejects, but get into Three from Hell, because I think at this point there's more people that have seen Devil's Rejects than Three from Hell. Yeah. So give our viewers your impressions of the Devil's Rejects, Mariana Chipoletta.
So right off the bat, I think I'm actually gonna go just a little bit further, but like as the three movies came out, I think they kind of like dwindled it down to like the main MVPs of the House of a Thousand Corpses. So in the second one, you really have more of this character build of Otis more than the others, I think, because with Baby, I feel like she was really watered down in Devil's Rejects, which was a little upsetting because I was expecting her to be just as crazy as she was in House of a Thousand Corpses, and you get that back in Three from Hell. But in Devil's Rejects, I agree with you. That was a really great movie, and you get a little bit more of Captain Spaulding, who is wonderful in my book, and I think that you get this more of this like idea of who they are rather than who their victims will be, because in House of a Thousand Corpses you kind of start to get an idea of what kind of victims they have, whereas in Devil's Rejects it really focuses on those MVPs, right? And the way that Otis goes about his business, I guess, it's different. I feel like it's less clunky than the way it was done in House of a Thousand Corpses. It was more of a story that I was following the story rather than these dream sequences, or not dream sequences, rather just like these sequences of how these people were dying in the House of a Thousand Corpses. Here you're seeing more of how they're trying to survive in this world that they've created for themselves, that's caught up with them.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's interesting. The Devil's Rejects. What ends up the kind of the themes that he's delving into with that is there's a lot about like the outsiders and the nature of the characters themselves. And as despicable and horrible as the main characters are, you end up identifying with those characters more so than the other characters. I think Rob Zombie has this amazing thing that he does in his writing and in his filmmaking, where he makes you identify more so with the main. I mean, they should be the antagonists, but they really are the protagonists. And as you kind of go watch the film, you start to see all these other characters that are being dispatched left and right are actually not that very good of people in general. And then Baby and Otis and Captain Spaulding, it seems like it is their nature in a way to go and kill and stuff like that. However, it's almost like the other people in the film, it's kind of almost their fault that they get in the path of these three characters, right? It's kind of like if you went to like a snake pit, and then you were like hanging out in the snake pit, and you're like, oh, it's that snake's fault that you get bit, and then you blame the snake for biting you. It's like, well, no, you're in a snake pit, and you kind of put yourself there. And in the Devil's Rejects, we kind of see this especially over near the end with Ken Foray's character and Michael Berryman. They run this whorehouse, and I can't remember what it's called right now, but Ken Foray is, friends with Captain Spaulding, and you get this great thing where they're partying and everything like that. But then Ken Foray ends up kind of like turning in Captain Spaulding and everything like that, and so he crossed Captain Spaulding. You could tell he's like, okay, this guy is not this force of nature that Captain Spaulding and Otis and Baby are, but they're willing to accept him because he's, kind of part of their world. And I think that they would have continued on being perfectly fine, all the hookers and Ken Foray and stuff like that in this place, had they not crossed, the Devil's Rejects. And so this theme continues on into Three from Hell. But before we go into Three from Hell, what are some of the bigger things that kind of popped out to you about the Devil's Rejects, and how did it kind of change your perception of what a horror film is?
Well, I think it's so different from a lot of the horror movies that I do watch, and I think that's what made it something that I really enjoyed. Uh, you know, Cinematically, maybe these movies aren't the greatest, but the story is there. Like you have this sense of urgency that you have in a lot of horror movies, but it's different. It's kind of like it's like you said, you're kind of rooting for them to get out of it. Whereas in the protagonists in a lot of horror movies are the people that are getting murdered, and so you're rooting for the final girl or something. Whereas in this one, the sense of urgency is like you kind of start to, or at least I did. I kind of started feeling like they're right. Like they have they have this freedom, and they're using it right. Like this was the 70s, right? that it's the setting is in. So you know investigating a murder scene is more like, there's blood over there. That's
Yeah.
it. That's the evidence. They were going more with their gut when trying to find these murderers. So you kind of see these tropes, the like the movie falling into these tropes where it's like, oh, how convenient that they just happen to know these people or just happen to know this fact. But you still have that magic of I guess of seeing the story move along, right? Like Rob Zombie, I think, does a really great job of moving the story along without falling too deep into those tropes.
I I definitely agree with you there. I think he has a great sense of story structure, and I think that's what makes him such a good artist and filmmaker and storyteller. Is that he knows the acts, he knows where he wants his characters to go, and he knows the beats to hit. And he knows which tropes to kind of dig into and which ones to kind of just tickle his toes about and get out of it. The themes that I really enjoyed about the Devil's Rejects that kind of endear the character to your heart and kind of make you think outside of the box about what is a good guy, what is a bad guy, what is an outsider. As we have this, the three of them, they're really a family, and family is the big theme of the movie. And you get this in this beautiful scene where they're driving in Captain Spaulding's truck, and baby really wants to stop for some ice cream, and Otis is like, "There's no fucking way we're gonna stop for getting ice cream." And then they end up doing that tutti fucking fruity thing back and forth, and then it's like you could tell that they're just happy to be around each other, like a family unit is, and kind of from that point on, after that, that's when you start seeing them in a different way, and you start seeing them as like maybe I mean, they're horrible, evil people, but what is the nature? What is the difference between nurture and nature and all of that stuff? And it is their nature to be the way they are, and so from that point on, they move along. And anyway, by the end of the movie, when you have this horrific gun, the guns blazing and Freebird playing, and you feel that they're just living out the best life that they can up until the very last moment. And then you feel that ending. And I remember for years, people thought, well, there's no way that he can do a sequel because he shot them full of hundreds of bullets. And then sure enough, Three from Hell comes out. And I'm like, okay, how are they going to explain this one? And but that wasn't really a big issue. So let's go into Three from Hell. Okay, let's just, we've kind of set the stage. We can jump back a little bit if we need to. So Three from Hell takes place a couple years later.
10 years later.
10 years, takes 10 years later. The three of them have been shot full of holes. Somehow they miraculously survive, as though the devil wouldn't let them die quite yet. Captain Spaulding ends up dying in prison, more from old age than anything else. And it's very sad that Sid Haig was actually dying at the time kind of that he was filming this movie, and he had a really hard time. He was supposed to have a bigger role, but he just was in really poor health. I remember I met Sid Haig over at Crypticon. He was a really nice guy, but he just seemed like it was a couple years before he passed away, and he seemed like he was slowing down. He was just kind of like he was, he was in poor health at the time, and he was very nice, but you could tell he really wanted a nap and a meal, and so it's extra sad that we see Captain Spaulding die in the film, because at the same time, I think he died in real life as they were filmed, after they had filmed his stuff and hadn't even completed the film. So anyway, so it's 10 years later, and Captain Spaulding and Baby and Otis are all in their separate prisons. And the thing that we start to see as we're seeing their different plights in life at this point, and especially with Baby, is you can see that how damaged they are from the experiences they've gone through, from the point that they got shot up to the point that they're now at. They're no longer able to be together, so they're no longer the happy family unit that makes them want, to live. And Baby's gone through some very traumatic things. It's not so much that she's gotten like the crap beat out of her and stuff, but that she's been separated from her family, and that really hurts her quite a bit. Oh, that's right. Spaulding died of lethal injection. That's my wonderful wife right there. She is reminding me, yes. So anyway, I kind of tangled it up in my mind how that happened. So anyway, we have Baby, and she's very damaged. She's very lonely. And Otis is the same. There's this theme of loneliness and outsiderness that kind of you could see in the Halloween films and what Rob Zombie was trying to do in those. And that's why I appreciated the Halloween films, was like the themes and the symbolism in those films kind of stood out stronger, more so than any of the other sequels of the Halloweens did. Like I know a lot of people hated those films. At least the second one. I love both of them. Anyway, so from that point, baby's in prison. Could you just break it down? We don't want to give away too much of the plot because I hate reviews that do that. So, Mariana, give us a little bit more about you watching this film. What did you think? Because it's like more fresh in your mind. I just watched it again, but you just watched it for the first time. Yes?
Yes. So if it wasn't for Captain Spaulding dying in the beginning, it would have been my favorite of the three, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Devil's Rejects remains at the top, but Three from Hell, I think, is a strong second. Or, right there with it.
It's right on level, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this monologue that Captain Spaulding gives while at the beginning where he says, "I'm your bozo Jesus, hung out to dry for the sins of mankind." And he goes on. And I think that kind of made it, that really spoke to the family, I think, because while Spaulding is at the, he's at the head. I feel like I've heard that a lot of people say like them surviving all these shots, you know, is just like a cheap way of bringing them back. But I think that there's actually something deeper there. Like there's a reason that they keep surviving. There's a reason. I feel like they are criminals ahead of their time, and there's a reason that they're there, and there's a reason that they survive and are able to get away. And it's not just coincidence. I think there is there is something within that world that's keeping them there, like they are necessary. So that monologue from Spaulding kind of set the tone for me for the rest of that movie. And again, with what you said, the theme of loneliness, that I think is a really big theme there, because we get introduced, it's not so much replacing Spaulding, but we get introduced to the half brother, the human wolfman. And while he's a poor substitute for Spaulding, I think he was a good addition to the trio, right? Because you get that back and forth between Otis and the Wolfman about who is now the head of the household, right? And then you've got Baby, who's just like, this is boring. Like, I don't want to talk to you guys anymore. I'm gonna go get a fucking hotel room for us. And speaking of Baby, like, she comes back as she's a little broken from being away for so long, but I think we're getting back a lot of what her personality was in House of a Thousand Corpses, which is how I fell in love with her. And yeah, before we keep going, can I play a little game with you, Joe? Can we please play what's it called, the game, Fuck, Marry, Kill?
I don't know what that is. Okay.
I mean, it speaks for itself. Now we're gonna use Captain Spaulding, Baby, and Otis. And yeah, I did think about it, and I'm still not sure about my answer, but I'd love to hear yours.
Okay, obviously F sexually, because the Baby, especially from House of I think she's beautiful. I think she has such a great character. Speaking in a dirty way, yes, she is a very beautiful person. But the characters. So physically, F, Baby, Mary, probably. So we're talking Captain Spaulding. Probably marry Captain Spaulding. I feel like he would take care of me. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think that because he's an earner, he has his business ventures that he's always getting on. He's a clown, but he has those commercials, like he has that business sense. So I feel like he would take care of me in that way. And then, not that I actually I love Otis, but if I have to pick the one of the three, I'm sorry, I got to kill you, Otis, because I don't see you winning the bread and taking care of this baby. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
What
that's
about
beautiful.
you?
I would definitely. I guess we're censoring ourselves. I would F Otis.
Well, we've
Um,
already said Fox, so it doesn't matter.
no, fuck it. I would fuck Otis. It's just I love a long-haired, strong man. You know, I would marry Baby, and I would kill Captain Spaulding, but not from hate. It would be from probably fucking his brains out.
Oh, I see. I see. So you just like you couldn't handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, his
I like,
little poor little heart would give out eventually.
I like that answer. That's a good answer.
But let's get back to the movie.
Let's get back to the movie. So I like what you said earlier about how they were placed, how it was actually like they were put into the world for a particular reason. That's the reason they keep sticking around and they haven't died yet. And I like this theme, and it's one that goes throughout um, Rob Zombie's films, but also other films such as Harrison Smith's Death House, where it's like, what is the nature of evil and why is it there in the first place? So you got to think, if God is so omnipresent and full of love and everything, then why does evil exist? And it gets down kind of to the core of like, our the human condition is like we need to know what evil is to know what good is. To want to get to a place of being better people is you have to know what the worst of humanity possibly is. And so it is in their nature, I think, to be that bad thing. And back to the nature, and they really capitulate and bring it up again and again in Three from Hell. There's this moment where I think a couple times where they bring up nature, and I think of the story of the scorpion and the frog, and there's even a point where Baby says, "Don't fuck with the scorpion, bitch," and I was like, I think that's directly, pointing to that story. And so you have I think I'll say what the story is. It's in one of they talk about it in one of my favorite movies, which is The Crying Game, which I highly recommend. That'll be a different day. But so the scorpion and the frog. So there's this scorpion that's sitting on the banks of this pond or river or something like that, and along comes this frog, and the frog says like, "Hey, how's it going over there?" Whatever, and the scorpion says like, "Oh, I'm kind of stuck here, but I want to cross over there." And the frog goes, "Well, hop on my back. I'll swim you on over there." And the scorpion goes, "Are you sure about that?" And the frog goes, "Sure, why not? Yeah, hop on my back." And so the scorpion hops on his back, and they're going along nice and peacefully. And then all of a sudden, the scorpion stabs the frog, and the frog looks at the scorpion and says, "Why would you do that? I was helping you along." And the scorpion says, "It's not my fault. It's my nature." Okay. And so it's kind of the frog's fault for getting in the way and trying to understand or be nice to. It's kind of like when you want to go hug a grizzly bear, and then you think, oh, they're all cute and everything. Well, the nature of a grizzly bear is they're going to eat you, like in the movie Grizzly Man. Just because you project your own goodness onto this thing does not necessarily mean that that thing is good or bad. It's simply its nature. And so in the film, they kind of touch upon that theme over and over and over. And that kind of actually makes you not identify, but sympathize, almost empathize. I'm not quite sure. Endear yourself to the characters, because these characters, it's their nature to be this way. And there's these moments in the film where you think they're actually not that bad. So there's this moment where they have escaped prison. I'm not going to give away too much, but they're down on the border of Mexico, or down already, about on the border of Mexico. And Baby she's bored, and she leaves the hotel room, and she goes to go get a soda, and she meets this guy that's like dressed in a sombrero and stuff like that. And
that's how she gets the idea to go to Mexico. So this is before.
Yeah, so it's before. So yeah, so they're on the border or whatever, down there. And it almost seems at first like she actually is reaching out. Like she's lonely, and she sees like, hey, is this guy kind of a friend to me? Is he simpatico? And And the guy at first, he's like kind of nice, and they're talking about soda. And I honestly, like, I was looking at her face when she's doing this. I honestly, and she's such a wonderful actor, Sherry Moon Zombie, and she's a very underrated actor. If you go watch Lords of Salem, it's so good. Everything she's in, especially Halloween 1, but Halloween 2 at the very end. Anyway, so there's almost this like look on her face, like, could he be my friend? And then this guy ends up being basically a perv that's just looking at her like a meat sickle.
Yeah.
Like he just wants to F her. And that's when things turn, and she's like, "Oh, well, I do want to party, but now it's not the way that I wanted to a minute ago." Because it honestly seemed like she was reaching out for a connection, and we end up having another thing like that happens later. So anyway, so I thought that's a very interesting theme, and this movie deals with it, and I think that's why it elevates it above other horror films and other. It keeps it on pace with Devil's Rejects to me. It keeps it right up here. I think they're both great. They're just different portraits. What about you? What else do you see that is popping on out in this film?
So, just before that, I'm not going to give away too much about why they're in a certain place, but I do want to mention that a clown does show up.
This is true. Yes,
a hired clown who is not a murderer. He's just a clown. But also, who hires a clown to come at 9 o'clock at night to a dinner party? Like of 4 people? I don't know. This was the 70s. I wasn't there. I don't know what was going on in the 70s.
Cocaine was a big thing back then. There's
Right.
Free sex, which I question the sexual revolution. There's a lot of going all over here and there. It's like, let's think back with 2020, folks. There's a lot of mistakes that happened in the 70s. We should not try to repeat. Okay.
But that scene really stood out to me. One, because it's so bizarre, right? That you have just this random clown.
Clint Howard, by the way, who is great.
Yeah, and he has this choice of making them laugh or dying. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's a Rob Zombie movie. Like, if you're in a Rob Zombie movie, you're gonna die. They should have known that from all of those people in this movie should have known that that was gonna happen. And I really wish I could say like why they were at that party, but I don't want to spoil it. So definitely go watch the movie if you haven't. And it just brought this first of all, it made me a little sad because I was like, "Aw, no Captain Spaulding." But at the same time, these Rob Zombie movies have a tendency of adding like this one element in the movie that just pops out for like a second and then recedes back into nothingness. And this clown was that one thing in this movie. And I thought that was really, like, it was so oddly placed, but at the same time so perfect. Like, yes, the movie could have gone without it, but I think it was necessary for us to see that that Otis and Baby do have like a fun side. I guess is how I would describe it. And same when they actually arrive in Mexico and they're partying it up at the Dia de los Muertos. Speaking of Mexico, my favorite thing about the entire time that they're down in Mexico, which by the way could have been its own movie, like you've got all the way to the end to that clown scene, that could have been a movie, and then you could have a whole nother movie that was just them in Mexico. My favorite part about that is when they go to the little motel run by Carlos and Sebastian has to be, other than the three main people, Sebastian is my favorite person.
He's the shorter guy, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is, in a sense, kind of like for Baby, like not like a replacement, but like a reminder of Tiny, who was not so tiny. But it's like that outcast that she I don't think that she loved him in the sense of love, but I think that Sebastian and Baby kind of had this connection of like we're outcasts, even within even, and not that Baby is an outcast within her own family, but you know you see her in all three movies. She's kind of, when Otis goes to do his own thing, she's kind of sad and she's kind of like, well, now what do I do? You know, like I don't have my play buddy. And so I think she found that kindred spirit in Sebastian, and you know the relationship that they develop in the short time that they've known each other. He it causes him to care about her, meaning that that you know since she cares about her family, he decides to help her and her family and basically sacrifices himself to help them out.
I like that you brought up Sebastian, because there is that moment where they're together in the room and she is reaching out and she sees him, who is an outsider like she is, and they find that connection. So it's not like he's an evil little dude going around killing people. He's not. He's quite the opposite. He seems like this very pure soul, and she recognizes that purity. And it's all the other characters in the film, in this one, and Devil's Rejects and House of a Thousand Corpses, that are really not very pure souls, and they're tainted in some way and not identifiable with her. And so she sees this purity, neither good nor bad, just it's just the nature of like what something is. And she sees like, okay, this is, you remind me of your brother, my brother Tiny, who's this giant, except you're little. And there is this beautiful moment where they're just hanging out and they're smoking weed, and he's drawing pictures of her. And I thought it was just such a lovely scene. And we're talking about Sebastian right now, so I looked it up right here, and I think we need to mention the actor's name. So his name
Pancho
is Pancho
Molar.
Molar. How do you say that? Molar?
Pancho Molar.
Okay, and I think he was wonderful in this film.
He was.
And so this says, and I just want to give him like a little spotlight here. So, born in Santiago, Chile, Pancho moved to the United States at age 8, and I know he's also like he was a professional like skateboarder at some point. And after suffering a debilitating back injury, which forced him to leave skateboarding, that's when he started going into acting and stuff like that. And so he was in Rob Zombie's 31, which is either love it or hate it with a lot of people. I really enjoyed 31. He's also been in several other horror movies and just other things in general. But 31, I think, is kind of like Rob Zombie's his kind of Picasso piece. It's his abstract horror film. And I think you have to kind of look at it that way. It's not, it can be confusing because he's not necessarily dealing with major themes in the film. It's like he's deconstructed everything, and he's presenting to you the deconstructed pieces of a strange horror film. And then he comes back with Three from Hell, and that's when you end up getting another masterpiece, because I think he needed to deconstruct certain things to get back to an amazing, fluid narrative, as it were. So Mariana, what else? Come
on. So much about this movie, and I don't I don't want to spoil anything. I just feel like this movie, like I said, if it wasn't for Captain Spaulding not being like the big role that he was supposed to be playing in it, it would have been my favorite of the three. And you have kind of this standoff at the end that I really liked. It kind of reminded me of like a spaghetti western, like a Clint Eastwood. The standoff at the end of Clint Eastwood's Fistful of Dollars. I don't know if you ever saw that. It kind of had that like that feel to it, because even in that movie as well, they have the coffins ready. So I felt kind of this like once they're in Mexico, I felt kind of transported into this, like I said, into like almost like it was another movie. So that whole scene, that whole thing down there was great. And I love that it was in this motel with like all these, like it's kind of reminiscent of the brothel, right, in the previous movies. And I this movie kind of mirrors the Devil's Rejects and a little bit of House of a Thousand Corpses. They reuse kind of the beats that you have in those movies, but you don't feel it in a sense like it's insisting on itself, like it's forcing it. And you're still surprised a little bit by what happens. You're surprised, and I was surprised and not surprised, right? Like, it's a Rob Zombie movie. I know they're just gonna kill off everybody anyway. I know everyone's gonna die. It's gonna be gory and fun and messy, and I know they're gonna get away with it, right? But it still has these twists and turns. Like, there is a part where they kind of start getting hunted down by this the I think it's the red Satanist, the black Satanist,
Black Satans, yeah.
the black Satanists, and they wear red masks, so I got confused. it it made me really happy to see that Baby was so playful with that entire thing. Like, she knew that they were in trouble. And that's how they all live, right? Like, any day could be their last. So they don't really they know that they could die, but they're like, fuck it, we're gonna have fun with it. And
Yeah.
so she puts on the headdress earlier, and she's like messing around and having fun with Sebastian. And then when the black Satanists come, she's like hiding in the room. And honestly, at first, when the first guy comes in and she shoots him, I didn't even see her in the corner. I mean, seeing the
Oh
scene the
yeah.
second time, I knew she was there, but I
Yeah.
didn't see her in the corner, and she shoots the arrow so precisely. And she does that with like a couple other kills, which is really fantastic that she does it in such like it's almost like a game to her, right? It's so playful, and I think this entire movie was more playful than the previous two,
Yeah.
and it gives this sense, and I think that's why I really enjoyed it. And it was just kind of the sense of like it felt bouncy. I don't know how to explain it. But that's like the funnest part about it. I don't even know that funnest is a word, but that's the funnest part about it is now.
Honest.
Is I think the way that Rob Zombie also plays with the scenes, right? Like, at the beginning when Baby is still in prison, and the guard that doesn't much like her, Greta, kind of puts her in this situation where any other person would not have been able to get out of, but with the way that the camera moves and those like the classic like Rob Zombie, like, move and then stop and then move and then stop camera. I don't know what that's called or what the technical term for it is, but it kind of makes you think like, oh shit, Baby's gone. Like, she did
Yeah.
not survive that. But it's quite the opposite. And you kind of get that throughout the movie. Like, you have these surprises, and in a sense you have this feeling of, I know they're gonna get out of it, but just like them thinking this could be my last day on Earth, you think this might be it. This might be the time that they actually get killed off, and it's Through from Hell. Like, are they gonna make? I mean, there's no way there's gonna be another sequel. I don't think, but uh, that's the beauty of it. Is like, now we don't know. We don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know if there's gonna be a sequel. We don't know what happens to them after Mexico. It ends so good. It ends so well with just like they're just it's basically the same driving off scene but without them getting shot.
I would. That's a good non-spoilery sort of way to say it. And there's this great theme. I think the overall theme is kind of living in the face of despair and hopelessness. And the characters of Baby and Otis are kind of constantly going into this kind of almost depression. Like, what's the point? Our family unit's been destroyed. How can we keep living? And just living to the fullest. And there's a point where Otis says, well, he lived more than anybody else, something along those lines, about Spalding. And it's kind of touching upon Sid Haig, too, because he had such an amazing career over the decades. He was in hundreds of movies. He was in one of my favorite films called Spider Baby back in the day. And I think that is kind of the big takeaway with the Three from Hell is it doesn't have that bittersweet ending that Devil's Rejects had, where you're like, you felt really good about how amazing the scene was with them getting shot up, but at the same time you were sad that they were getting shot up and then possibly dying, But then it comes back and they're dealing with that big theme of hopelessness and despair, and by the end they've decided that no, we're going to live despite what comes our way. And I think that's what made the film quite amazing. Mm-hmm. And one more thing, did you notice, and I think this is kind of a big thing down in that Mexican town, almost everybody had like Muerte face paint.
Yeah, because it was the Dia de los Muertos, which is the day after Halloween.
Mm-hmm. And I was also thinking that this is kind of like the city of the dead, and these people are kind of like, they're not really living, and they don't realize that they're already dead. And
but it's the opposite. Like the whole holiday is about the celebration of of those who have died. But even in the movie, like throughout it, like as they're celebrating, they're so alive and so lively. But it is like these people don't even know they're dead yet.
Yeah, and that's like the big theme, and it's like he really points like, hey look, this is the theme. It's about living. It's about celebrating life in general, and it's not about the killing of all these people and everything. Even though those are the parts that you like a lot, but
and of course, like the woman. I'm sorry, but like the best nude scene in this whole thing is when so the woman who ends up in bed with the Wolfman, he goes off somewhere. I can't remember if he goes to the bathroom or whatever, but when the black Satanist comes through the door and she's just like naked and she just like answers the door like it's nothing, and she's just like, fuck you, like I have a boyfriend now. But her death was beautiful.
Yeah, it is some very good. Well, I think without spoiling anything more, I think that kind of gives a little bit of a wrap, so we should probably start wrapping things up here.
Yeah.
Mariana, in homage to Rob Zombie and to the theme of living despite hopelessness, despite what might seem like a very dark time for man, to what gets us up out of bed and all that good stuff. Could you give the words of wisdom, some lovely little sentiment to our people, to our folks that are watching right now, as we say au revoir?
I guess I could. I mean, I'm no Mark Twain.
You say these things in such a beautiful way in a different language of sorts. So give us a little taste of the boot, perhaps.
A little taste of the boot. Oh gosh, I didn't prepare. Oh, now you put me on the spot like every time, and I don't know why I'm never prepared for it.
Yeah.
Something to. Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Okay, well, how about this?
Nothing. Vivere. Dobbiamo vivere. It just means we need to live.
Okay, well, there you go. That's all I'm asking. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again for joining us on the No Country for Joe and Mariana podcast. We had a really great time projecting this. Now it's out on Twitch, and this will also be on YouTube here next week. So if you missed it here at Twitch, well, you won't even know it because you'll be watching on YouTube. No, it doesn't matter. All right, everybody. Well, you take care, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye, and live life to the fullest despite how dark times may seem.